Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Prop Wiz. I'm your host, the Wiz. Today, we'll be doing a review of the NCC 1701 USS Enterprise by Gambody. Gambody is a site that sells 3D print files. I used them before. I have gotten comments. It's hit or miss for people. For the most part, they've done right by me. Though I gotta admit that a couple of the models weren't accurate, and it was not accurate by like small little details that seemed like it could have easily been fixed. But I don't know what goes into making these STL files. Is it something they have permission to use? Are they changing it slightly, to change the model just enough for them to sell it? Like, I don't know the ins and outs. That's just me guessing. With that being said, for the most part, for my needs, they've been accurate enough. So even when it's been off just a little, to me, it hasn't been that bad. And this USS Enterprise is right along the lines of that for the most part. Now, I did compare this to the actual model that they have in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. To me, the differences were very small, if at all, to be honest with you. There was a couple of things, but you got to also understand, man, with these models that were used in movies and TV shows, there were also slight differences between model and model. For instance, the USS Enterprise from the pilot episode, and I believe the first episode was different than the rest of the episodes. Some really big differences. In fact, the turbine engines were slightly different. There was some paint schemes on there that was slightly different. So I just chalk it up to that. So mostly to say, just from looking at it, it's probably accurate. A super duper big Star Trek fan can probably point out some things that might be off here and there. There might be a window that might be off here and there. But again, from my view, it was perfect. And if it's not perfect, then it's perfect enough for me. With that being said, if you're a 3D print enthusiast and you know how to work the 3D programming to manipulate the actual STL file, the actual digital file, this is probably a good starting point for you to add or subtract things to make it more perfect if you're able to do that. My skill level isn't there yet. But anyways, as far as the model itself, obviously this is the whole thing. Let me grab the pieces. I should have put this thing together before I got started. Now that we got this thing in there, it might block my face a little bit, man. This thing is huge. First of all, my upscale, the actual print files wasn't this big. I did upscale it. If you've seen some of my other shows, I generally upscale everything that I print. Famously, I think one of my biggest videos was the Batwing from the 1989 Batman movie. I upscaled it to as big as I could on the print bed that I have. I use a CR10. Now, since then, I have upgraded to the printer. In fact, this is the printer box that is on there. This is a Creality 3D printer as well. This is the Creality K1 Max, man. So I did upgrade. I still have one CR10, but I did replace one of my CR10s with this just because I heard that it prints way, way faster. The print bed, it balances automatically, and there's a lot less misfires, misprints. Most of the prints that came out perfect. I've had one misprint actually during the making of this, and I think it was just something that I think it was a user error, man. So to be honest with you, this was the first thing that I printed with this printer. It came out perfect. So we'll break. Let's talk about the model and I'll talk about the printer as well, the print process. So first of all, obviously this big thing came in pieces, which definitely made it easy to upscale. The actual disc is the biggest part, and it came in these little triangle pieces. I think it was about 5 pieces all together. So these 5 triangular pieces that you were able to put together. The turbine engines were 2 parts and the body was 2 parts. And of course, you got all these little itty bitty pieces. The turbine, there's a lot of details that go on there that print separately. So I say all together, there was 14 main parts, huge parts, and then all these little details or whatnot. The print overall took me 3 days to print, maybe 4 days. Might have been less than that. Like I said, it's crazy because I had printed out a smaller version of this. In fact, Gambody, to go back on Gambody, by the way, I'm not hired by Gambody at all to talk about them. They didn't pay me to say anything good about them. But along those lines, one of the things I do enjoy as proof with this actual print model, I had an earlier version. It was a lot smaller, a lot less detailed. I was able to notice the difference between that model and the actual Star Trek model a lot easier, but I still enjoyed that one. In fact, that was a better example of where it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for me. With that being said, they did update the model based off people writing, man. People made comments saying, hey, why did you do this? We wish this was more accurate. It'd be a lot easier to paint if this was separate. And these bad boys actually did drop new files, which is crazy because when I got this printer, I was going to reprint that model when something told me, let me go on Gambody to see if they updated it. And they had, in fact, updated the model. If you had already purchased the model, that update is absolutely free. So this updated version is a lot accurate. Maybe during the end video, I might just compare it, just pull it out so you can see a little bit of the difference. Some of the things that were imperfect that aren't perfect that I actually like was these words are actually raised. So the USS Enterprise, the numbers on the sides is raised just a tad bit. That is not accurate. If you're going for accuracy, you probably want that completely flat. I enjoyed it because I couldn't get the stencils right for the other model. I couldn't get the words right, to be honest with you. So I wasn't good enough to do my own stenciling and flat version of those letters. So for me, the raised version, which is easier to see, easier to paint, I like it. To me, to the eyesight, it looks just fine. You let me know by the video. Of course, we're going to do some close-up footage. But anyway, for me, those main parts and everything being separated the way it was worked out perfect. Everything connected very, very well. There was very, very little putty. There was a couple of areas I put putty on, I think on the turbine, just in case. But the way they cut it was almost in line with where some of the lines are, especially the disc. Yo, you got this outgoing pattern, of course, where the triangles. So, of course, that's where the connections were made as well. So they were a little bit different. You could tell where it was connected. I think there was one here that I did kind of fill with putty because there was a little gap where it didn't connect just perfect. But for the most part, you can actually make that decision of adding putty or not. Like the model came together very, very well in that regard. Also, talking about the model as well as going back to the printer, this printer actually, because it print faster, I really didn't have to do anything as like my old printer. I think I used a bigger nozzle, which meant there was a lot more print lines or more visible print lines. This printer prints way faster. I don't know the math, but to me, it might have been a good maybe 3 or 4 times. It's extremely fast. There was prints that took me days, that took me 8 to 12 hours, that didn't even take a day. So way, way faster. So with that being said, it did that without me having to change the nozzle. So I was able to use a smaller nozzle, which meant the details are a lot smaller. I think the printer technology is a little bit better. So the print lines were less anyway. There are still print lines. Even now, sitting this close to it, I can actually see print lines that I didn't get rid of, but for the most part, to the eyesight, definitely to the touch, it feels smooth. So that eliminated a lot of sanding that I usually would do. If I was to go back and reprint this, I might sand the raw plastic, but for the most part, I was able to spray it with a primer, a sandable primer, and just sand that. Now, there are some details here that I did use the resin printer to print, just some of the windows. In fact, all of the windows, these little turbine covers, I did all in clear resin. My resin printer, as crazy as it is, during the print of this, I was actually doing this and the USS Enterprise D, which, unbelievable, is the same scale as this, but way, way bigger, if that makes sense. Like I made it the same percentage as this, but evidently the next generation Starship Enterprise is probably, man, I think the dish alone is the size of this width-wise. So way, way bigger. But anyway, my resin printer went out in the printing of that. So there's a couple of items here. These, the red and green lights here, I did do with translucent 3D filament print. Of course, it's not as translucent or as clear as the resin can get. But for something like this, this is fine. I'm not really printing windows. Really, these things are there to me to look different than the actual Starship. You can tell this isn't super translucent, but you can see a little bit in there. If we had lights hooked up to this, which this was built to have wiring going through it, I decided not to do the wiring because I didn't know. I actually printed this for a friend. Don't know where he's putting it. If I was to keep one of these things, I don't know where I would put it. So I don't know where the wires would come out. I just didn't want to deal with any wires that or anything that had to be plugged in. But I will say, just flashing a cell phone light in just parts of this thing, it does look beautiful. There is a part of me that wish I did do a lit version. I might do that in the future. But again, as of now, I don't have the resin printer. So I'll have some issues with the translucent parts if I do make another one of these. But hey, we had challenges before, easy challenges to get through. With that, going over some of the highlights with the translucent, like I said, I got these covers. I did print an actual turbine under this. So I printed that, painted that orange, reddish, and then kind of painted this gold because I've seen different pictures. I tried to go half and half. I've seen pictures with these things. Of course, most of the models you see, or most of the photos you see, these things are actually lit up. But the one in the Smithsonian and some of the models that I've seen, and some models that they sell, I feel like they always paint this gold. So I tried to go half and half. I painted the edges of it gold, the middle of it gold, and I left some of it translucent so you can see the red turbine under it. So to me, that gives it kind of a design look that there's something workable going on, that you can actually see the turbine engines in there. I mentioned the Smithsonian Museum earlier. This was the Flight Museum, I believe, where me and my family were able to see the actual Starship Enterprise that was used for the filming of the original show in person on display right after. I believe we saw it the month that they finished the restoration, or they had just finished the restoration and added it to the museum. So I was able to see it close, and I was very, very surprised on how weathered the Starship Enterprise was. Like, it's still hard for me to believe. Now, even as I was painting this, it was like, man, dude, this is too much. I would look at those reference photos that I took, and also they have a pretty cool documentary. If you're a Star Trek fan, you probably already seen that. If you haven't, it's an awesome documentary about how the Smithsonian actually took the Starship, took it completely apart to restore it back to its glory days. So even in those videos, I was able to see just a lot of the weathering. I guess I would compare it to a ship. Like, we look at the Enterprise as a spaceship, but it seemed like, which makes sense even with the writing, the uniforms. I think I heard it being told that Star Trek was like submarine warfare, is how the show was described by the creators. Even some of the creators on the newer movies where, I believe, what's my boy name? J.J. Abrams. His movies, of course, are moving a lot faster, a lot quicker. It's more Star Wars-like. So even in the description of that, they described the original show being as submarine warfare. Evidently, Abrams didn't like the submarine warfare, so he went in a different direction. But anyway, I'm getting off subject. My point to that is, when you look at it like this, it is like an actual ship that you would see in the water, where it would have all this, where it's painted exactly that way. Even the grays and the subtle reds, and where the words are and how the words are, right? The words got this military style, but also the weathering has that. So I guess the idea is to have this giant ship would have the same kind of issues and weathering and decaying that you would have in space, even though this ship is a little bit more newer. Now, it's still not quite the same as a Star Wars, because Star Wars has weathering that reflects those ships being old, super old, used all the time, never worked up. The Enterprise doesn't quite have that. Again, it just has a weathering from actual, I guess, using the word weather, like just from the elements. You got streaks from where it's just flying through space. So you just got weather from it being just used versus it being old, if that makes sense. So I say all that to say, I did a hell of a lot of weathering on this bad boy. It's very, very weathered. Again, I used multiple references, not only the Smithsonian ship, which should be the Bible, but depending on how you're taking pictures. When I took pictures of it, there was a glass there, so you're going through the glass. But I also used some very popular models that they sell. There's one in particular, I don't remember the name of it, but there was one they just recently released. It was real cheap. It was a $600, I think a 12 to 13 inch model that was very, very, very detailed, sold out very quick. It's hard to find them now. They're like $2,000. In fact, that was my motivation for making this, because I found out about that model, went to buy it. It was like $600. Mind you, $600 no little bit of money, but for this model, man, it was that gorgeous. But when I went to buy it, it was already sold out. Yo, what happens when something is too expensive for me or I can't find it? I go ahead and pull the 3D printer out. So that's how this bad boy came along. Anyways, for the most part, man, I love the model. Not even for the most part, I actually love this, man. Like I said, shout out to my homie Valme. It's a cat that, man, he used to invest in our music to the utmost, man. He used to lend us movie cameras to shoot music videos, give us gas money to go to shows. And Valme always buys anything, any CD we drop, anything we do, including this show. He's been one of the first supporters of this show. So, hey, shout out to Valmay. That's who this is going to. And if it wasn't Valmay, man, I would have thought about keeping this bad boy. I actually have no, this is huge, man. So I actually have no space for it. Wouldn't know where I would put it if I did keep one or make one for myself. But it's cool. It's cool to sit here now, man. Just to ever say that I had it in my possession, I guess, is a testament, and I have this video as proof. But this bad boy is going to Valmay, which is the reason why I still haven't glued certain parts. You saw it earlier. It was still in pieces. That way I'll be able to mail it and hopefully no damage will be caused in the mail. But anyways, man, that's my thoughts and review on my own print. I didn't review my 3D print, but just reviewing the model itself, what Gambody did, man. I think they've done excellent work, man. I got a Batmobile, the 2021 or 2022 Batmobile that I'm working on now. And again, I got the Enterprise D, which is huge. The painting on that is way more complicated. They got this design called the Aztec design. So it's not as simple as painting it gray and just weathering it. There's all these little details that I gotta paint. So I'll probably be working on that for a while unless I completely give up on it. But those are two models, and I got a couple of Star Wars models. So I got a bunch of stuff coming from Gambody. It's one of my favorite sites right now. Again, even though it's not perfect, I did have a guy comment about the imperfections of Gambody, and I have to totally agree. I have to be honest with you. I do agree with his assessment. Is just like I said, it's not that bothersome to me. And then you got other tools where you can adjust and kind of update it how you like if you want. But I think the next couple of models I have are pretty accurate. I was eyeballing, or I think I bought the Back to the Future DeLorean. So my next mission, even with the Batmobile and some of the vehicles, is some of the figures that I have, 7-inch, 8-inch figures, is going to print the vehicles for those. So I have the NECA Back to the Future. I have the McFarlane Batman from the Batman movie. So I wanted to print vehicles specifically for those, since they didn't release cool ones that I know of for those. I know they didn't release the DeLorean in that size for those figures. But anyways, leave me some comments, man. Let me know what you guys are feeling. Also, if you like this video, please take the time to hit that like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe. As always, I love you guys to death, and I'll check you out next time. All right? Peace.
Yeah. The final. Yeah, here she goes. The final. To explore strange. To explore strange. We at the crossroads again, where the roads begin to grow again. The crows instead I go against the girls that's dating older men. The mental manipulation that's taking over them. Knowing if these young girls get focused, it'll be over then. Exposing their frozen thoughts, the coldest hearts they holding in. I see through these evil people, but still to be sobering. For a moment when we heal the sickness, before we go again. Holding in the thoughts of hopelessness, but still we hoping this sickness that exists in this world that we live in. They doing things that leave scars, so it's hard to forgiving them. And I ain't God, so I have to accept these sinners when they begging him for forgiveness before the end of them. Days that they living in, we face imminent danger each day. We in it, the planet in space spinning later. The fader dial is turned down, so there's no sound. Before now, it was loud, you couldn't hear the 4 pounds. Shooting 4 rounds in a dog pound. Your kids convinced the pronouns the primary fight. I fight for souls, world. I ain't trying to discount, they fight now, but everything wrong in this world is wrong right now. We gotta